Imagine being humiliated and fired in front of everyone. Your crime? Showing a shred of compassion to a janitor that everybody ignored. What no one knew, however, was that this nobody, this invisible man, was actually the new billionaire CEO of the company, working completely in disguise. This wasn't just a firing, it was a public execution of her career. A brutal lesson in a world that sometimes seems to reward the cruel and punish the good. Have you ever felt that way? As if your kindness was somehow a weakness? Have you ever questioned if doing the right thing is even worth it when you see injustice get rewarded? This is the story of Evelyn Warren, a woman whose heart of gold put her in the crosshairs of an arrogant boss, and of Lloyd Shaw, the powerful CEO who hid in plain sight to find the true soul of his company. Get ready for an emotional journey of secret identity, an unexpected love story, and a shocking plot twist that will test everything you believe about justice, romance, and redemption. But before the truth comes to light, the stakes will be raised to an unbearable level. There will be a false defeat, a moment of darkness so deep it will make you believe all is lost, making the final life-changing reveal even more powerful. This is a true drama. If you believe a person's true strength is their kindness, comment "kindness wins" right now. Like this video as a sign of support for Evelyn. Share it with someone who needs a dose of hope, and subscribe, because you won't want to miss the moment the entire truth is revealed. The afternoon shattered without warning. The mundane hum of keyboards replaced by the booming, cruel voice of a boss on a power trip. All eyes snapped towards the source, Evelyn Warren, standing frozen as her manager publicly dismantled her. The scene was nothing short of a corporate execution, a raw and ugly display of power designed to make an example of her. This wasn't a private meeting or a quiet word, it was a spectacle, an intentional act designed to leave her utterly humiliated in front of all her peers. Her supposed crime, the one that warranted such a shocking outburst, was an act of simple human decency. Earlier that day, she had offered a warm smile and a kind word to the new janitor, a man most people looked straight through. For her boss, this was an unforgivable sin, wasting company time on a nobody. It was a twisted perspective, where compassion was a liability and empathy was a fireable offense. He saw her kindness as a weakness to be stamped out, a flaw in his perfectly ruthless machine. That janitor, the silent witness to this unfolding drama, was a man named Lloyd Shaw. To everyone else, he was just part of the furniture, a ghost who cleaned the messes no one else would. But beneath the worn-out overalls and weary expression was a secret identity of immense power. Lloyd was, in fact, the company's new billionaire CEO, spending a week in disguise to diagnose the true culture of his organization. He wasn't just mopping floors, he was conducting the ultimate undercover kindness test. "You're fired." The words, sharp and final, sliced through the tense air, sealing Evelyn's fate. Her boss delivered the line with a triumphant sneer, clearly relishing the moment of absolute control. There was no appeal, no HR, just a brutal, on-the-spot termination. For Evelyn, the world tilted on its axis. The job she poured her heart into, her very livelihood, was snatched away not for incompetence or failure, but for an act that came from the best part of her, leaving her emotionally devastated. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with the unspoken fear of every other employee. They watched, heads down, pretending to be absorbed in their work, yet stealing glances at the heartbreaking scene. No one dared to intervene. No one offered a word of support. The boss's message had been received loud and clear in this kingdom. Cruelty was the law, and anyone who defied it would face the same fate. The chilling episode revealed a workplace rotting from the inside out, ruled by a tyrant. From his corner, Lloyd Shaw watched every single moment, his expression unreadable but his mind racing. This was more than he could have ever anticipated. He had come looking for inefficiencies and cultural issues, but what he found was a level of casual cruelty that turned his stomach. The raw injustice of seeing Evelyn being fired for her compassion was a shocking plot twist in his investigation. This single, heart-aching event was becoming a life-changing catalyst for the direction he would take his entire company. As Evelyn gathered her few belongings, her face pale with shock and despair, she was unaware of the powerful ally she had just made. The seeds of an incredible story, one of revenge, redemption, and an unexpected romance were being planted in that very moment of defeat. The rich man, poor woman narrative was about to be flipped on its head. Her boss thought he had won, but the quiet janitor in the corner was already planning a response that would bring the entire corrupt structure crashing down in a truly spectacular fashion. Evelyn Warren was the kind of employee who was the bedrock of the company, yet never saw the light of day. She was diligent, meticulous, and possessed a deep, unwavering compassion that she extended to everyone, regardless of their station. She wasn't just processing paperwork, she was quietly holding things together, fixing mistakes before they became problems, and offering help without ever being asked. Her work was her pride, but her kindness was her defining trait, a quality that her superiors saw as utterly insignificant. While she poured her soul into her work, she was struggling under the weight of financial hardship, living paycheck to paycheck in a city that demanded more than she had. This was the unspoken drama of her life, a constant, quiet battle hidden behind her professional demeanor. This stark reality made the injustice of her workplace even more bitter. It was the classic painful story of the rich man, poor woman dynamic, where the most valuable people are often the least valued financially, a truth she lived every single day. In maddening contrast stood her boss, a man who was the architect of his own hollow empire, built on a foundation of fear and intimidation. He didn't lead, he ruled. His success was a carefully constructed illusion, measured in the number of people he could belittle in a day rather than in genuine achievements. He thrived on the superficial, mistaking the silence of his terrified employees for respect and their compliance for loyalty, a truly toxic brand of leadership. He was a master of stealing credit and shifting blame, ensuring his own star continued to rise on the backs of hardworking people like Evelyn. His office, large and ostentatious, was a testament to his inflated ego, a world away from the cramped cubicle where Evelyn performed the actual work that made him look good. He represented the worst of corporate culture, where style savagely triumphed over substance and a cruel heart was seen as a prerequisite for success. The contrast between them was a silent, ongoing battle of values. Evelyn believed in collaboration, integrity, and the simple power of being good to people. Her boss believed only in himself, in victory at any cost, and in the idea that compassion was a pathetic weakness. He saw her quiet diligence not as a strength, but as something to be exploited, a resource to be squeezed until it ran dry, showing a shocking lack of humanity. This fundamental conflict was invisible to the upper management, who only saw the flawless reports and impressive numbers her boss presented as his own. They were oblivious to the emotional and ethical cost of his success. Evelyn, the true engine of the department, remained an overlooked cog in a machine that was celebrated for its shiny exterior, even as its internal gears were grinding themselves to dust under a tyrant's watch. So when he fired her for an act of kindness, it wasn't an aberration, it was a perfect encapsulation of his entire philosophy. It was the inevitable, explosive outcome of a system that rewarded cruelty and punished decency. For Evelyn, it was a devastating blow. But for the culture of the company, it was simply business as usual. A tragic and routine display of where its true priorities lay. A drama Lloyd Shaw was now witnessing firsthand. Lloyd Shaw didn't become a billionaire by trusting spreadsheets and sanitized corporate reports. He was a man who believed in seeing the truth for himself, no matter how ugly it might be. As the enigmatic new CEO of a company he had just acquired, he refused to be a distant figure in an ivory tower. He devised a daring plan to go undercover, to trade his tailored suits for a janitor's uniform and embed himself on the front lines, a secret identity to unearth the real company culture. For 1 week, he would be a ghost, pushing a broom through the hallways, invisible to the very people he now employed. This was his method, a way to observe the unvarnished reality of the workplace, how managers really treated their subordinates, who was truly working hard, and what the morale was like when the big boss wasn't around. He needed to know if the company's heart was healthy or if a sickness had taken root, and he knew the answer wouldn't be found in any boardroom. On his very first day, amidst a sea of employees who either ignored him or looked at him with disdain, he saw Evelyn Warren. She was different. When she passed him in the hallway, she didn't just walk by, she met his eyes, offered a small, genuine smile, and a quiet hello. It was a minuscule gesture in the grand scheme of things, but in the cold, impersonal environment of the office, it felt like a bonfire of warmth and humanity, a truly heartaching moment for the CEO in disguise. This small act was his first clue. As he continued his silent observation, Lloyd saw her profound integrity in everything she did. She worked with a focused grace, helped colleagues without seeking praise, and carried herself with a quiet dignity that stood in stark contrast to the ambient cynicism. She was the real deal, a person whose character was as solid and dependable as the ground beneath his feet. He saw in her the kind of person he wanted to build his entire company around. His undercover mission was already yielding shocking results. He had expected to find pockets of dissent or areas of inefficiency. What he hadn't expected was to find the moral compass of the entire organization embodied in one compassionate, overlooked employee. Evelyn's simple, unwavering decency was a powerful indictment of the prevailing culture, which seemed to reward the loudest and most ruthless, not the most virtuous. Lloyd's admiration for her grew with each passing hour. He saw her as a rare gem in a pile of rocks, someone whose intrinsic worth was being completely ignored by a system that was blind to what truly mattered. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that she was the key. Her character, her integrity, and her kindness were the assets he was searching for, the true north he needed to guide the company's future. Therefore, when he later witnessed her public firing at the hands of her arrogant boss, it wasn't just an upsetting event for him, it was a declaration of war. That moment crystallized his entire mission. It was no longer just about observing the culture, it was about tearing down the corrupt parts of it and rebuilding it around the very values that Evelyn Warren had just been fired for. A quiet redemption was about to begin. The mockery directed at the new janitor was relentless and casual. Colleagues would make snide remarks as Lloyd Shaw cleaned up a spill or emptied a bin, their words laced with a casual cruelty reserved for those they deemed beneath them. They saw him as an object, not a person, a target for their petty frustrations. But amidst this chorus of disdain, Evelyn Warren became his unlikely and consistent defender. "Leave him be," she would say softly but firmly, her voice cutting through their derision with quiet authority. This wasn't a one-time act, it was a pattern of behavior that Lloyd, as the CEO in disguise, observed with growing astonishment. She never sought an audience for her defense of him, she did it simply because it was the right thing to do. Her compassion wasn't for show. It was an integral part of who she was, a reflex as natural as breathing. She was extending a shield of dignity around a man who, she believed, had none, unaware she was protecting the most powerful man in the building. The most heart-aching moment, the one that would forever be etched in Lloyd's memory, came midweek in the sterile break room. He was sitting alone, having nothing for lunch, when Evelyn approached him. She had noticed he never seemed to eat, and without a word of judgment, she opened her own modest lunchbox, split her sandwich in half, and offered it to him. "Everyone needs a decent lunch to get through the day," she said with a simple, warm smile, an act of pure, unprompted kindness. For a man who could buy any restaurant in the city, this simple half sandwich was the most valuable meal he had ever been offered. It was a gesture of profound empathy, a recognition of their shared humanity that transcended their supposed stations. In that emotional moment, Evelyn wasn't just sharing her food, she was sharing her spirit. She was treating him not as a janitor, but as an equal, a fellow human being deserving of care and respect, a key part of their unfolding love story. This was the ultimate proof for Lloyd. He was witnessing a character so pure and strong that it operated beautifully even when no one important was watching. Evelyn's actions were a quiet rebellion against the office's toxic social hierarchy. She refused to participate in the casual degradation of another person, choosing connection over cruelty every single time. Her treatment of him was a life-changing lesson in true leadership. He saw the stark difference between her and everyone else. Others sought to elevate themselves by pushing him down, while Evelyn sought to lift him up, even though she herself was struggling. She was rich in a way money could never define, and he was beginning to feel profoundly poor in comparison, despite his immense wealth. Her simple decency was dismantling his cynical worldview, one kind act at a time. Her unwavering dignity in treating him as an equal was the final piece of evidence Lloyd needed. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this woman was extraordinary. The admiration he felt was quickly morphing into something deeper, a profound respect and affection for the person she was. He was no longer just a CEO on a mission, he was a man who had just met the most incredible woman he had ever known, setting the stage for a truly surprising romance. The pressure was mounting around a crucial quarterly report, a project that could make or break careers, and Evelyn's boss was feeling the heat. Seeing Evelyn's competence not as an asset, but as a threat to his own fragile standing, he decided to engage in some petty sabotage. He deliberately withheld key data she needed, providing incorrect figures at the last minute and creating a maze of obstacles designed to make her fail. It was a cowardly act, a quiet declaration of war waged from the shadows of his corner office. He expected her to flounder, to panic, and to ultimately come begging for his help, cementing his position of superiority. The drama was all part of his manipulative game. What he didn't count on, however, was Evelyn's sheer resilience and unwavering competence. She was more than just a kind heart, she possessed a brilliant and methodical mind. Faced with the incomplete and faulty data, she didn't crumble, she dug deeper, staying late into the night, long after everyone else had gone home. From his janitorial cart down the hall, Lloyd Shaw had a front-row seat to this masterclass in professionalism. He watched as Evelyn, fueled by coffee and sheer determination, cross-referenced old files, made logical deductions to fill in the gaps, and meticulously corrected the errors her boss had planted. She wasn't just doing her job, she was a detective, piecing together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Her focus was a sight to behold. By morning, against all odds, the report was not only complete, but it was perfect. Her competence had not just overcome the sabotage, it had transformed a potential disaster into a work of art. She had polished a piece of coal into a diamond. And her boss was none the wiser, assuming his own flawed data was somehow the source of the brilliance. He presented her work as his own in the morning meeting, completely oblivious to the late-night battle she had won. Lloyd's admiration for her, already significant, skyrocketed into a new stratosphere. He had seen her kindness, her integrity, and her compassion. Now he was seeing her incredible professional talent and her grit under pressure. She wasn't just a good person, she was a powerhouse, a brilliant employee who was being systematically undermined by the very person who should have been championing her. This was a shocking waste of talent. This episode revealed another layer of the company's sickness. Not only did it punish kindness, but it also actively worked against its most competent people, all to soothe the egos of insecure managers. Evelyn should have been running the department, not fighting to survive in it. The injustice of it all solidified Lloyd's resolve. Changes were coming, and they were going to be swift and decisive, a life-changing shift for the entire organization. He now understood that Evelyn wasn't just the heart of the company, she could very well be its future brain too. His initial kindness test had evolved into a full-blown assessment of character and skill, and Evelyn Warren was acing every single part of it. The growing feeling in his chest was more than just respect. It was the beginning of a deep, emotional connection, the first spark of a true love he never expected to find. The workplace drama escalated when a jealous rival, envious of the praise Evelyn had received for the flawless report, decided to play a truly dirty hand. Seeing an opportunity to eliminate her competition, the rival planted a valuable company tablet in Evelyn's bag and then anonymously reported it as stolen. It was a vicious, calculated move designed to ruin her reputation and get her fired. A poison arrow shot from the darkness of petty corporate jealousy. Evelyn was blindsided when security and her boss confronted her, their faces grim. She watched in horrified disbelief as they discovered the tablet in her bag. Her protests of innocence fell on deaf ears. Her boss, always eager to believe the worst, saw it as the perfect excuse to get rid of her. For a moment, it seemed like the lie would stick. The trap had been sprung, and Evelyn was caught in its teeth, about to be humiliated all over again. But the accuser had overlooked one crucial detail: the janitor. Lloyd Shaw, who had been cleaning a nearby office, overheard the rival plotting on the phone earlier that day. He knew it was a setup. His protective instincts flared. He wasn't going to stand by and watch this injustice happen. It was time for a little subtle revenge on Evelyn's behalf. Moving quickly and quietly, he knew exactly what he had to do to orchestrate a plot twist of his own. Before security could escort Evelyn out, Lloyd accidentally spilled a bucket of soapy water near the rival's desk, forcing them to move their belongings. As the rival frantically gathered their things, a small, personal keychain with a very distinct and recognizable charm fell to the floor unnoticed. Lloyd subtly kicked it under the security desk, right where it would be found. It was a small move, but it would change everything, a perfect surprise. When the head of security, reviewing the situation, bent down to plug in a scanner, he found the keychain. He recognized it immediately as belonging to the rival. His curiosity piqued. He decided to review the security footage from the hallway near Evelyn's desk, a step he might have otherwise skipped. The footage was damning. It clearly showed the rival, keychain visibly attached to their belt loop, slipping the tablet into Evelyn's unattended bag. A shocking and undeniable piece of evidence. The lie was exposed in a spectacular fashion. The rival was immediately called in, their face turning white as a sheet when confronted with the video evidence and their own lost keychain. Evelyn was exonerated completely, receiving a stunned, half-hearted apology from her boss, who was furious that his chance to fire her had been thwarted. It was a moment of sweet, immediate redemption, engineered by her secret guardian angel. Evelyn, though relieved, was left wondering at the sheer luck of it all: spilled water, the found keychain. She had no idea that the nobody janitor had just been her savior, subtly manipulating events to ensure the truth came out. For Lloyd, it was a test of his own ability to act from the shadows. He had protected her, and the satisfaction he felt was immense. His role was shifting from observer to protector, deepening his emotional investment in her story. For years, Lloyd Shaw had operated under a simple, ruthless business philosophy: results were all that mattered. He had built his empire on shrewd decisions, tough negotiations, and a healthy dose of cynicism. He believed that in the cutthroat world of business, a certain degree of detachment was necessary for survival, and that kindness was a luxury one couldn't always afford. He was a good man, but the world he lived in had hardened the edges of his heart. But watching Evelyn was like taking a class in a forgotten language. Her currency wasn't profit margins or market share, it was decency, empathy, and integrity. She operated from a core of unwavering goodness that he found both baffling and profoundly beautiful. He saw how she celebrated a colleague's success, even the rival who tried to frame her, without a hint of jealousy. This simple, unwavering decency was a force of nature he had never encountered in a boardroom. Every act of her kindness was a chisel, chipping away at the cynical armor he had spent decades building around himself. He found himself questioning the very foundations of his own success. Had he become too ruthless? In his relentless pursuit of victory, had he forgotten the importance of the people who helped him get there? Evelyn's existence was a quiet, powerful rebuke to the man he had become. A man who valued balance sheets more than human connection. This was more than just a business observation, it was a deeply personal and emotional reckoning. He remembered the man he used to be, younger and more idealistic, before the world taught him to be wary and guarded. Evelyn reflected a version of himself he thought was long gone. Her spirit was a mirror, and he wasn't entirely proud of the reflection staring back at him. It was a silent, life-changing confrontation with his own soul. He began to see the world through her eyes, noticing the small dignities and indignities of daily life in his own company. He saw the fear in the eyes of employees when a manager walked by. He saw the loneliness of the person eating by themselves in the cafeteria. He started to see his company not as a machine for making money, but as a community of human beings, each with their own stories, struggles, and hopes. This was a profound redemption of his perspective. The ruthless CEO was being dismantled, and in his place, something new was beginning to grow, a leader who was starting to understand that a company's true strength isn't in its stock price, but in its soul. Evelyn's influence was reprogramming his entire operating system. He realized that true power wasn't about intimidation or control, it was about inspiring the best in people through trust and compassion. This internal plot twist was perhaps the most significant of all. Lloyd Shaw, the titan of industry, was undergoing a radical transformation, all because of a kind, overlooked employee who had no idea she was changing the world of the man pushing a broom down the hall. He was falling for her, not just for her beauty or her mind, but for the way she was making him want to be a better man. This was the start of true love. The tension in the conference room was thick enough to cut with a knife. A major client was present, and the stakes were incredibly high. Evelyn's boss, as usual, was heading the presentation, preening and posturing for the visitors. But when a slide appeared with a glaringly incorrect financial projection and error, stemming from a last-minute change he himself had made and failed to communicate, didn't miss a beat. He immediately turned his cold fury on the one person he knew wouldn't fight back. "Evelyn, what is this?" he hissed, his voice dangerously low, ensuring the client could hear every word. He publicly accused her of incompetence and carelessness, painting her as a bungling assistant who had jeopardized a multi-million-dollar account. He berated her cruelly and methodically, using her as a scapegoat to save his own skin. It was a masterful, monstrous performance of blame-shifting, designed to leave her utterly humiliated while he emerged as the leader dealing with a crisis. For Evelyn, it was the ultimate betrayal. She stood there, speechless and shaking, as he tore her professional reputation to shreds in front of a client. She knew the mistake was his, but what could she do? To contradict him now would be career suicide, an act of insubordination he would never forgive. So she took it, absorbing the unjust tirade with a silent, heartbreaking dignity that only amplified the cruelty of the act. The injustice was staggering. Silently pushing a dust mop in the hallway just outside the glass-walled conference room, Lloyd Shaw witnessed the entire horrifying exchange. This was it. This was the final straw. He had seen the boss's everyday cruelty, his sabotage, and his ego. But this was a new level of depravity. To sacrifice a loyal employee's integrity for your own mistake in front of a client was an act of such profound injustice that it made his blood run cold. The silent witness was no longer just an observer, he was a judge, and the verdict was in. This man was not a leader, he was a cancer, poisoning everything and everyone he touched. The sheer, unadulterated evil of the act solidified every doubt Lloyd had. There was no redeeming this manager. There was no coaching him to be better. He had to be cut out, completely and without mercy, for the health of the entire organization. As the client shifted uncomfortably in their seat, clearly embarrassed by the unprofessional drama, Lloyd felt a cold, calm certainty settle over him. The time for observation was over. The time for action was now. He had seen all he needed to see. The kindness test had concluded with a catastrophic failure on the part of management. The emotional toll on Evelyn was immense, but it had just signed her boss's professional death warrant. He watched as the boss, having completed his tirade, smoothly transitioned back to his presentation, leaving Evelyn standing on the side, shattered and disgraced. But what the boss didn't know was that his fate had just been sealed by the janitor in the hallway. The game was over. The need for revenge, or rather for justice, was no longer a thought. It was an imperative. The firing was now an inevitability, and it was going to be epic. The firing that followed the client meeting was swift and brutal, a mere formality after the public execution she had already endured. With her boss's false accusations now officially on her record, she was escorted out of the building like a criminal. The injustice of it all was a physical weight, crushing her spirit and leaving her hollowed out. She walked away from the building not just without a job, but without a shred of the professional pride she had worked so hard to build. Back in her small apartment, surrounded by packing boxes, a devastating conclusion began to take root in her mind. All her life, she had believed in the power of kindness, that doing the right thing was its own reward. But the world had just taught her a brutal lesson. Her compassion had been repaid with cruelty, her integrity with betrayal, and her loyalty with a humiliating dismissal. She was being punished for the very best parts of herself. A profound and heartbreaking shift happened within her. The optimistic, kind-hearted woman began to believe that her kindness was not a strength, but a fatal weakness. It was a vulnerability that people like her boss would always exploit. She saw her empathy not as a gift, but as a flaw in her design, making her unfit for a world that rewarded ruthlessness. This was her lowest point, a moment of absolute despair where her entire worldview crumbled into dust. This was the emotional core of the drama. With her spirit broken and her finances in shambles, she made a life-changing decision. She couldn't stay in a city that had chewed her up and spit her out. There were too many painful memories, too many reminders of her failure. She decided to leave for good, to disappear to a small, quiet town where she could lick her wounds and perhaps find a simpler life, far away from the brutal landscape of the corporate world. It was a retreat, a surrender. She methodically packed her bags, each folded shirt and placed book, feeling like a final goodbye to the life she had tried to build. She didn't tell her friends where she was going, too ashamed and heartbroken to explain. She just needed to run, to escape the crushing belief that she was fundamentally broken. This heart-aching scene was the story's false defeat, the moment where the audience would believe that all hope was lost for our hero. As she packed, she found the small, worn-out business card of the janitor, Lloyd, which he had given her in case she ever needed anything. For a fleeting moment, she considered calling him, the one person who had shown her consistent decency. But she tossed it aside. What could a janitor do? It was a hopeless thought. She was alone in this, convinced that her kindness had led her to ruin and that nothing and no one could fix it now. With one last look at her empty apartment, Evelyn Warren walked out the door, leaving behind her job, her home, and her faith in the goodness of people. She was a woman adrift, heading into an unknown future with a shattered heart. She was convinced that in the real world, kindness didn't win. It got you fired. And she was determined to never make that mistake again. A tragic end to this chapter of her love story. The morning after Evelyn's firing, Lloyd Shaw arrived at the office not as a janitor, but as the CEO. He was energized, filled with a righteous fire and a clear plan. Step 1, publicly fire the tyrannical boss. Step 2, find Evelyn. apologize profusely for what she had endured, and offer her a senior position. He envisioned the look of surprise on her face, the moment of redemption, the beginning of their real story. He was ready to fix everything, to be the hero in this drama. He strode into the HR department, his expensive suit a stark contrast to his janitorial disguise from the day before, causing a wave of stunned confusion. "I need Evelyn Warren's contact information, immediately," he commanded, his voice filled with an authority that left no room for questions. The HR manager, flustered, typed furiously at their keyboard, their eyes growing wide with a mixture of fear and confusion as they pulled up her file. "I'm sorry, sir." The manager stammered, "Her file is here, but she's been terminated. And it says here she vacated her apartment this morning. There's no forwarding address, no phone number listed, nothing." The words hit Lloyd like a physical blow. Gone? He had waited one day too long. In his methodical planning for a grand reveal, he had failed to account for the speed of her despair. She had simply vanished. A cold, unfamiliar feeling washed over him, panic. For a man who could solve any problem, who could move markets and acquire global corporations with a single phone call, the simple fact of a missing person left him feeling utterly powerless. He had all the resources in the world, but they felt useless in that moment. He had let the most genuine, incredible person he had ever met slip through his fingers. It was a shocking and unforeseen plot twist in his plan. The fear that gripped him was intense and deeply personal. This was no longer just about righting a corporate wrong. It was about the terrifying possibility that he had lost her forever. The budding feelings of their unspoken love story, the admiration, the connection he felt, it all now seemed like a cruel joke. How could he earn her trust? How could he tell her how he felt if he couldn't even find her? The surprise wasn't that she left, but how much it hurt him that she was gone. His regret was immediate and overwhelming. He should have acted sooner. He should have stepped in the moment her boss started yelling. His adherence to his undercover mission, his desire for a perfect, dramatic conclusion, had cost him dearly. He had let the system he was trying to fix break the one person who mattered most, and now she was gone, believing she was worthless and alone. The emotional weight of his mistake was crushing. Standing in the middle of the office, the powerful CEO, Lloyd Shaw, felt a sense of loss so profound it staggered him. The grand redemption he had planned felt hollow now. What was the point of fixing the company if the person who inspired the change was lost to him? His mission instantly changed. Finding Evelyn Warren was no longer just a part of the plan. It was now the only thing that mattered. His search for her and for her forgiveness had just begun. While Lloyd was reeling from Evelyn's disappearance, a truly sickening drama was unfolding back at the office. In the vacuum left by a senior manager's sudden retirement, upper management needed someone to step in quickly. Seeing the decisive action Evelyn's boss had taken to handle a personnel issue, and impressed by the flawless report he'd claimed as his own, they made a jaw-dropping decision. They offered him a temporary promotion to acting vice president. The news spread through the office like a virus, sickening every employee who knew the truth. The tyrant was not only getting away with his cruelty, he was being actively rewarded for it. He strode through the office with an insufferable new swagger, his chest puffed out, a smug grin plastered on his face. He made a point of announcing his success in a team meeting, framing it as a testament to his tough but effective leadership style. He gloated openly, using Evelyn's firing as a case study in cutting the dead weight and maintaining high standards. He painted her as an incompetent employee whose removal had directly led to his own advancement. For the downtrodden staff, it was a soul-crushing spectacle. It reinforced the most toxic lesson a corporate culture can teach, that in the real world, cruelty isn't just tolerated, it's a viable, and even celebrated, path to success. This temporary victory for the villain was a crucial part of the story's agonizing arc. It was the salt in the wound for everyone who had witnessed his injustice. It made Evelyn's suffering seem not just tragic, but meaningless. The universe wasn't just indifferent, it seemed to be actively rewarding the bad guys. This development was a hammer blow to the morale of every decent person left in the company, creating a sense of hopelessness. The boss, now drunk on his new power, became even more tyrannical. His demands grew more unreasonable, his temper more volatile. He saw his promotion as a validation of his entire philosophy. In his mind, his cruelty had been officially endorsed by the company. He was untouchable, a monster who had just been handed even bigger teeth by a system that couldn't tell the difference between a good leader and a good liar. This crushing turn of events was the darkest moment before the dawn. It was designed to make the audience truly hate him, to feel the injustice deep in their bones. It raised the stakes for his eventual downfall, making the need for revenge more potent and the desire for justice more desperate. The more he gloated, the more he reinforced the crushing idea that the world was fundamentally unfair. A world where kindness gets you fired and cruelty gets you a corner office. What the gloating new VP didn't know was that his every move was being monitored. Lloyd Shaw, though consumed by his search for Evelyn, had not forgotten his promise. He was allowing the boss to climb just a little bit higher, to get comfortable in his new unearned position. Because Lloyd knew that the higher you are, the harder you fall. The boss's temporary success was just setting the stage for a much more public and satisfying humiliation. The CEO's office, which should have been a place of triumph for Lloyd Shaw, had become a war room for a mission of the heart. The profound regret he felt was a constant, gnawing presence. Every corporate decision he had to make felt meaningless compared to the one life-changing mistake he had made letting Evelyn disappear. He looked out over the city, a kingdom at his fingertips, yet the only thing he wanted was to find one woman who had vanished without a trace. With a grim and steely determination, he began to mobilize his immense resources. This was no longer just a story of a rich man and a poor woman. It was the story of a powerful man desperate to undo a wrong. He hired the best private investigators in the country, their only brief being a photograph of Evelyn and the simple, urgent command, "Find her." He didn't care about the cost. Every penny of his fortune was worthless to him if he couldn't find her. The search was a desperate, methodical race against time. He had his security teams analyzing traffic camera footage from the day she left, checking bus and train station manifests, and tracking any use of her credit cards. But Evelyn, seeking anonymity, was using only cash and staying off the grid. It was as if she had been swallowed by the earth, leaving Lloyd to confront the terrifying limits of his own power in this emotional quest. Days turned into a week, and the lack of news was agonizing. Lloyd was barely sleeping, his mind consumed with scenarios of where she could be and what she might be feeling. He was haunted by the image of her face after she was fired, the look of utter devastation. He knew he was responsible for that pain, and the guilt was a heavy cloak he couldn't take off. His search wasn't just about finding her, it was a desperate quest for his own redemption. He was determined to do two things when he found her: apologize and earn her trust. He knew it wouldn't be easy. From her perspective, he was just the janitor who had stood by and watched her life fall apart. How could he possibly explain the secret identity, the undercover test, without sounding like a manipulative billionaire who had played games with her life? The thought filled him with dread, but he knew he had to try. This desperate search was the ultimate proof of his transformation. The old Lloyd Shaw might have written off the situation as an unfortunate casualty of business. But the new Lloyd, the one Evelyn had unknowingly changed, understood that some things were more important than business. His pursuit was fueled not by ego, but by a genuine, heart-aching need to make things right and a burgeoning true love he could no longer deny. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, there was a breakthrough. A small transaction, a debit card purchase for a coffee at a roadside diner 300 miles away, was flagged. It was a tiny blip, a needle in a haystack, but it was all he needed. A grainy CCTV image confirmed it. It was Evelyn. He had a location. Without a moment's hesitation, he canceled his meetings, told his pilot to ready the jet, and set off. His quest for redemption was about to have its most important chapter. The small town was a world away from the steel and glass canyons of the city. It was quiet, unassuming, and the perfect place to disappear. Lloyd found the diner easily, a cozy little place with a bell that jingled when the door opened. And there she was, Evelyn Warren, wearing a simple waitress apron, pouring coffee with a sad, distant look in her eyes. Seeing her there, so far from the life she should have had, was a heart-aching and painful sight for him. For a long moment, he just watched her from his car, his heart pounding in his chest. He had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, all his carefully prepared speeches felt hollow. The powerful CEO, the man who commanded boardrooms with unshakable confidence, was terrified. He knew that one wrong move, one hint of the arrogance she associated with power, and he would lose her for good. He had to do this right. He finally got out of the car, but he didn't approach her as Lloyd Shaw, the billionaire. He deliberately wore simple, unassuming clothes, making sure he looked more like the janitor she had known than the CEO she didn't. He walked into the diner, the bell jingling his arrival, and sat at a booth in her section. When she approached, notepad in hand, her eyes widened in a flicker of recognition, followed by confusion. "Lloyd?" she whispered, completely stunned. "It's me, Evelyn," he said softly, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't hide. He didn't try to explain everything at once. He started with the most important thing. "I came here to find you, and to say I'm sorry. I am so sorry for what happened, and for not doing something to stop it." He looked her directly in the eyes, letting her see the genuine, profound regret he felt. This wasn't a power play, it was a humble appeal from one human to another. He didn't make excuses. He simply told her that he had witnessed her kindness every single day, and that he should have stood up for her. He asked, humbly and without any expectation, for her forgiveness. He was not a CEO asking an employee. He was a man asking for a second chance from the woman he had wronged, the woman he was falling in love with. This was the raw, honest start to their true romance, built not on wealth, but on a shared moment of kindness. Evelyn was speechless, completely thrown by this impossible surprise. The janitor from her old life was here, in this tiny town, apologizing with a sincerity that was impossible to fake. 1,000 questions swirled in her mind, but looking at the man in front of her, she saw only the decency she remembered. It was a crack of light in the darkness that had surrounded her for weeks, a moment that felt both surreal and deeply real. In that quiet diner, far from the corporate world that had broken her, the first step toward healing began. His humble apology was the first domino to fall in a chain of events that would change both of their lives forever. He hadn't won her trust back yet, not by a long shot. But by approaching her with humility and honesty, he had opened the door, just a little, for a true love to finally begin its journey. Evelyn was still processing his apology, her mind reeling, when Lloyd knew he needed to back his words with immediate, undeniable action. Talk was cheap, especially from men who held power. He needed to prove his sincerity was real. "I know sorry isn't enough," he said, pulling out his phone. "What you deserved was justice, and you're going to get it right now." Her eyes widened as he dialed a number, his thumb hovering over the call button. He put the phone on speaker. "Get me Acting VP Henderson." Lloyd's voice was calm but carried an iron authority that was completely new to Evelyn. A moment later, the smug, arrogant voice of her former boss filled the small diner. "Henderson speaking." Lloyd leaned in. "This is Lloyd Shaw, the new CEO, and as of this exact moment, you are fired. Your cruelty, your deceit, and your incompetence have no place in my company. Security will escort you out." The line went dead silent, followed by a sputtering protest before Lloyd hung up. The revenge was swift, brutal, and utterly satisfying. For Evelyn, hearing the man who had ruined her life be dismissed so clinically and completely was a shocking, cathartic moment. It was justice delivered with surgical precision. But Lloyd was just getting started. This wasn't just about punishing the guilty, it was about fundamentally changing the system that allowed such a man to thrive in the first place. He had to prove this was a life-changing moment for the company, not just for one man. While still sitting in the diner, he made another call, this time to his new head of HR. He began outlining a series of immediate, company-wide policy changes. From now on, he dictated, we are implementing a zero-tolerance policy for workplace bullying. We're also creating a new kindness integrity bonus, rewarding employees who demonstrate compassion and teamwork. He was embedding the very values he had learned from Evelyn into the DNA of the corporation. He was proving to her, in real time, that her influence had been profound. He explained how her simple decency had inspired this entire revolution. He wasn't just giving her a job back, he was remodeling his entire empire in her image. He was showing her that her kindness wasn't a weakness, it was the new cornerstone of a billion-dollar company, the most valuable asset they had. This was the ultimate validation of who she was. This wasn't just a grand gesture to win her over, it was a sincere act of leadership and redemption. He was using his immense power to create a better world, starting with his own company. He was ensuring that no other employee would ever have to suffer the way she had. He was fixing the problem at its root, not just treating the symptoms. It was a testament to how deeply her character had touched him, a key part of their unfolding love story. Evelyn watched, a whirlwind of emotion swirling within her: shock, relief, and a burgeoning sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. This man, who she had known as a humble janitor, was wielding immense power with a wisdom and grace that was breathtaking. He wasn't just firing a bad boss, he was honoring her. And for the first time, she began to see not just the janitor or the CEO, but the man Lloyd Shaw, and she was beginning to trust him. The memo went out with electrifying urgency: an emergency, all hands, company-wide meeting in 1 hour. No exceptions. Speculation ran wild through the office. The firing of the acting VP that morning had already sent shockwaves, and now this. The atmosphere was thick with anxiety and rampant rumors. Everyone, from the mailroom clerk to the senior executives, filed into the main auditorium, a sea of nervous faces wondering what seismic event was about to occur. The lights dimmed. The hushed chatter died down. On stage, the interim coup stood at the podium, looking just as tense as everyone else. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began. "As you know, there have been some significant changes today. To explain these changes and the future direction of this company, I'd like to introduce you to our new Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Lloyd Shaw." The name meant nothing to most people, he was a mystery. And then, from the wings, a man walked on stage. A collective audible gasp swept through the auditorium. Whispers turned into stunned shouts. It couldn't be. It was Lloyd, the janitor. He was wearing a perfectly tailored, expensive suit now, but the face was unmistakable. He walked to the center of the stage, a calm, commanding presence, and looked out at the sea of shell-shocked employees who had ignored or mocked him for the past 2 weeks. "Hello, everyone," Lloyd said, his amplified voice filling the stunned silence. "For those of you who don't recognize me, my name is Lloyd Shaw, and yes, for the last couple of weeks, I've been your janitor." This confirmation sent a second, more powerful shockwave through the crowd. It was the most shocking plot twist imaginable, a surprise so profound that people could only stare, their mouths agape, as they tried to process the impossible reality of the situation. He let the stunning revelation hang in the air for a moment, letting the full weight of it sink in. He could see the dawning horror on the faces of those who had been cruelest to him. and the pure, unadulterated shock on everyone else's. The secret identity was out. The janitor they had all dismissed as a nobody was, in fact, the most powerful person in their world. The power dynamic of the entire company had just been inverted in one breathtaking moment. I took an unusual approach to my new role because I believe you can't understand a company by looking at a spreadsheet. He continued, his voice resonating with authority. You have to look into its heart. You have to see how people treat each other when they think no one is watching. His gaze swept across the room, and for the first time, the employees understood that they hadn't just been working, they had been part of a massive, secret kindness test. The reveal was a masterstroke of theater, a life-changing moment for every single person in that room. It was a clear and powerful message everything was about to change. The old rules no longer applied. The very foundations of their corporate culture were about to be shaken to their core by the man they had all thought was just there to clean up their trash. The drama had reached its absolute peak. With the entire workforce still reeling from his shocking reveal, Lloyd Shaw moved to the final act of his grand plan. For the past 2 weeks, I've seen the best and the worst of this company, he announced, his voice booming with conviction. I saw jealousy and deceit, and I saw a manager who built his career on the backs of others, a man who would rather sabotage a good employee than celebrate her. He then systematically, and with cold, hard evidence, exposed every single act of deceit committed by the former boss. He didn't just fire him, he dismantled his legacy in front of everyone. He detailed the sabotaged report, the lies to the client, and the cruel, unjust firing of an exemplary employee. It was a public reckoning, a moment of absolute revenge that was also an act of supreme justice. The former boss, wherever he was, had not just lost his job, his entire professional reputation was being incinerated on a stage for all to see. The redemption for all his victims was palpable. Then, Lloyd's tone softened. But I also saw something incredible, he said, and his eyes scanned the crowd. I saw integrity. I saw a quiet competence that shines even in the dark. And I saw a level of kindness and compassion that I believe must be the foundation of our future. He paused, building the anticipation, which is why I have made my first official executive decision. He gestured towards the side of the stage, and the crowd turned as one. Walking onto the stage, looking nervous but resolute, was Evelyn Warren. A murmur of stunned recognition rippled through the audience. I would like to introduce you all to your new Vice President of Operations, Lloyd declared, his voice filled with pride. Evelyn Warren. The surprise was electric. The woman who had been humiliated and fired just days earlier was now being elevated to one of the highest positions in the company. A life-changing promotion. Some of you may be shocked, Lloyd continued, standing beside Evelyn. But you need to understand, her competence is matched only by her character. That is what we will build this company on. Not fear, not ego, but the simple, powerful idea that treating people with dignity is the ultimate key to success. He publicly declared that her character was the company's most valuable asset. A statement that turned the old corporate values completely on their head. This grand public gesture was the culmination of everything. It was justice, revenge, and redemption all rolled into one spectacular moment. It was the ultimate validation for Evelyn, restoring everything that had been stolen from her and more. It was a clear message to every employee, this is what we value now. This is who we are. Kindness is no longer a weakness here, it is a superpower, the very core of their new identity. As the auditorium erupted in a wave of stunned, then thunderous applause, Lloyd turned to Evelyn and smiled. This was more than a business decision, it was a declaration. In front of the entire company, he was showing her that their story, the unlikely romance between a CEO and a kind employee who saw the man behind the disguise, was just beginning. This was the ultimate culmination of their love story, a testament to the power of true love and a well-deserved happy ending. In the end, this wasn't just a love story or a tale of revenge. It's a powerful reminder that the quietest acts of kindness can echo with the greatest force. Evelyn's compassion wasn't a weakness that got her fired. It was a superpower that transformed an entire company and changed a billionaire's heart forever. It proves that your character is the one thing no one can ever take from you. If you also believe that your kindness is your greatest strength, that integrity is more valuable than any title, then you've found your community. You belong here with us. So make it official, subscribe, and join a family that celebrates stories where the good guys don't just win, they rewrite the rules of the game. Now for the trifecta first. Press the like button as a sign of respect for Evelyn's unwavering character and to help spread this message of hope across YouTube. Second, answer this in the comments. Which moment in this story was the most satisfying for you? The firing? The reveal? The promotion? Let's talk about it. And finally, share this video with one person you know who has a kind heart. Let's make sure these stories reach the people who need them the most. And your journey with us doesn't have to end here. While you wait for our next story, know that our channel is a treasure chest filled with emotional journeys just like this one. Explore our older videos and discover the other incredible stories of redemption, love, and shocking plot twists that you might have missed. We are always searching for the next unbelievable story to tell, and you won't want to miss what's coming. To make sure you're here for our next emotional roller coaster, activate that notification bell. That way, you'll be the first to know when a new chapter is released. Thank you for watching.